Hey guys, it's Robin, and I'm here to talk to you about language of choice again. I'm doing a follow-up video because I had a lot of questions after my last video on how this applies to older kids, not just preschoolers. I also had some follow-up questions on specifically how to do this with preschoolers. So I wanted to touch base and talk about language of choice again with all different ages. My husband worked in foster care for almost 10 years, and he found that language of choice works with older kids. It even works with teens who are going through trauma, who have some authority issues, because it works really well to find the balance in power. Now, the reason we use language of choice is to prevent power struggles. Like I said in my other video, there's two different extremes. The one extreme is a permissive household, where the child has all the power and they pretty much have all the authority too. They do this either through tantrums, manipulation through tears. The parents may not know they're being manipulated. Sometimes they are, and they just haven't fought back. So the child has all the power. The other extreme is the parent has all the power. Now, this is an authoritarian household, and it's kind of a dictatorship. Now, a lot of you will think, well, I'm a parent, I'm supposed to have all the power. But that's not necessarily true, because power and authority are two very different things. As an adult over here, you should have authority, but you should not have all the power. This is a dangerous extreme, just like this is a dangerous extreme. So we're going to talk about language of choice, because language of choice finds the middle ground. You as an adult still retain your authority, but your child has a sense of power. This is how we keep power struggles from happening, because when we're on two extremes, if the child has all the power, the adult's going to try to get some back. And if the adult has all the power, the child's going to try to get some back. So remember, there's a difference between authority and power. Power is when you have control over somebody else. Now, language of choice always starts with an authority statement. That's the first thing we do, because you are the authority in the household. You are a parent, and there's nothing wrong with being an authority. That's your assigned role, and it's a great thing. Remember, power and authority are very different. You do not need to be abusive of your power to be a good authority. So an authority statement is just that. It's a statement. It's not a question. How many of you have said, it's time to clean up, okay? Or it's time to do your homework, okay? And then immediately regretted it because you ended a sentence with okay. So you turned it into a question when it was actually a statement. When we turn things into questions that are actually statements, what we do is we give our children a sense of power, and then we take it away immediately. So we say, oh, you have what you think you said to the child was, it's time to clean up. Is that okay with you? It's time to do your homework. Is that okay with you? And the child will be like, well, no, it's not okay with me. But what you meant was, it's time to clean up. And so it's not a question. It's also not a command. For those grammar people out there, command is different than a statement. So a statement is, it's time to do our homework. And we can say this nicely, and tone matters. We can say, it's time to do your homework now. And you don't have to say it in a mean way. I had somebody follow up from my last video and say, and ask, well, should we be saying please? Shouldn't we be modeling please? We should be using please and thank you all the time with our kids. But in this situation, you can say it in a very kind way without having to say please. You can say, it's time to clean up, instead of clean up now. That's a command. Tone matters. The moment we are not doing authority command, we're saying authority statement. The moment you command, you have robbed the child of all power, and you have just set yourself up for a power struggle. So remember, authority statement. It is time to clean up. It is time to get your shoes on. It's time to go to school, hopefully when school comes back. It is time to do your e-learning. It's time to do your math. It is time. And we do a statement telling them what our expectation is of them. It's time to take a shower. So the next step in language of choice, hopefully you won't need it. If you give a nice authority statement that isn't a question, that isn't a command, hopefully your children will go, oh, okay, it's time. But I also have 2 children and know that's not always going to happen. So the next step is giving a choice. Now, this is where you get to keep your authority while giving your children a sense of power. The second step is giving your choice between A and B. So you repeat your authority statement. It's time to do your homework. And then the choice, if they did not comply, is do you want to do your math or do you want to do your English first? Now, this gives your child a sense of control over what they're doing. There's a lot of different examples on how we can say this. You could say, it's time to go. Do you want to put your shoes on or do you want to put your coat on first? It's time to eat your dinner. Do you want to eat your mashed potatoes or your green beans first? It's time to go to the bathroom. You can go now or you can go in 5 minutes. You need to share your toys with your brother. Do you want to give it to her now or do you want to give it in 5 minutes? Or we need to share our toys. Do you want to give her 1 horse or do you want to give her 2? It makes them feel like they have a sense of control because we are not giving them, it's not a choice to clean up. It's not a choice to do your homework. It's not a choice to get in the car. It's not a choice to do your e-learning. What they're doing is not a choice, but how they do it is. And that's the key of language of choice. You retain your authority, but they have a sense of power. Language of choice empowers them to follow your authority. If anybody's ever had a kid who's freaked out because you asked them to wear a pair of shoes and they threw a fit and screamed, I don't want to wear those shoes. It could be a toddler or a teenager. Usually they're not necessarily freaking out just because of those shoes. The reason they're freaking out is because they feel like they have no control over their life somewhere in their lives, especially during right now, if you watch this later, but right now while I'm filming it, we're dealing with the COVID pandemic and there's a lot of loss of control. Kids don't feel like they have any control over their life. So they're going to try to find control and power in other ways, like what shoes they get to wear. So this is where the pick your battles come in because you're realizing they just want control. So we need to decide that it's okay for them to do it in their way. If they follow your authority, you told them it's time to get their math done or time to get their school done, it's fine if they do their math first or their English first. So the third step for language of choice is repeat the choice. Now, you've given your authority statement and they didn't follow it. Then you gave an authority statement plus choice A or B. So you're telling them how, giving them some choices of how they can accomplish what you've asked them to do. And they're not following it. I usually repeat the choices that I gave them. It's time to do your math. Do you want to do your English or your math first? On step 3, repeating the choice, I tend to slow down and my tone gets a little bit more serious. You know the mama tone. It's a mom tone. It's not a mean tone. I'm going to repeat the choice. I'm not going to explain. I'm going to repeat verbatim exactly what I said. Don't let your kids start monologuing you. Don't let them try to get you into explaining all the choices and but, no, it's good. You need to do your English. No, it's time to do your homework. Do you want to do math or English first? My kids know that when I start talking low and slow, they're getting into dangerous ground there. I heard once that said, do not yell at your kids, lean in and whisper because it's scarier. It's true. So that's fine. It's okay to repeat your choice. It's also important. There are going to be parents out there right now watching this going, well, I'm not going to repeat myself. Well, guess what? Children don't hear well when their brain is filled with emotion. Teenagers do not hear well when their brain is filled with emotion. So it is totally appropriate for you to slow down, look in their eyes, and repeat the choice. And I also want you to know that there are going to be kids that if you give them point A, choice A or choice B, they're going to come up with a choice C. All of you have one. I bet every single one of you is thinking of a kid that does that. So if you say, it's time to do your homework, do you want to do your math or your English first? And they're going to say, I want to do my art first, or I want to do my science first. Okay, that's fine. Because their choice C did not contradict your number one authority statement. Your authority statement does not change. It's okay if they pick C. And it took me a really long time to be okay with that, to know that sometimes there's going to be kids that always want choice C. But the idea is that their choice and their power doesn't contradict your authority. What they're doing is not a choice. How they do it is. And you have to be okay with that as a parent. So the fourth step in language of choice is follow-up choice is a consequence. So this is when we've said our authority statement, we've given them a choice A or B, we've repeated slowly and calmly that choice if they did not obey. Now, the next choice is a follow-up consequence. You keep your original authority because that's not going to change, but their choices get a lot less appealing. So it's time to clean up. You can clean up or you can choose to go to timeout. It's time to clean up. You can put away your iPad or you can lose it for a week. So these choices no longer have A or B that are, both of these would be okay for you to do. Now you keep your authority statement. All through these steps, your authority statement is the same. You do not explain it. You do not change it. It is time to do your homework. It is time to clean up. Now you say your choices are you can do your homework or you can go to your room for 2 hours or something. There's always a consequence. Whatever consequence you do in your household, because I'm not going to be in charge of the consequences you do in your household, but the consequence needs to be the choice now. And the way I always say that is you put away your iPad or you choose to lose it for a week. You need to clean up or you choose to lose your blocks for a week or you choose to go to timeout. You are choosing. You are choosing. It is really important that we are telling our kids you are choosing this consequence, because do you see that I'm putting the responsibility on the children? The consequences of their actions are on them. We are trying as parents to connect cause and effect in our children's lives. And we want them to see that they have power over cause and effect. We want to give them power over consequences. We want to make a connection and give them power over connecting their action to their consequence. How important that is for an adult to know the difference, the connection between their action and their consequence. You chose to be grounded. You chose to lose your iPad. You chose this. So we want to always be using language of choice, meaning that your child chooses to obey. Your child chooses the consequence if they disobey. So that's where the whole term language of choice comes from, because we always want it to be in the hands of the child so that they feel power. So even if they end up getting the consequence, it's their fault and they had power over that. So next time we will empower them to obey because they had power over the consequence. And they could have chosen differently, so they could have chosen not to have a consequence. So that's our consequences. That's our fourth step. The fourth step is consequences. Now, quickly, I want to follow up by addressing some issues and some questions that I had after the last video about consequences. Now, consequences should be consistent. They should always be getting a consequence. Strong consistency really matters when you're dealing with strong-willed children versus compliant children. Now, a compliant child is going to avoid disobedience if you're even if you're inconsistent with your consequences. For you lucky people out there who have compliant children, you know that if they might get a negative consequence, even just one time out of 10 that they do something wrong, they're probably going to avoid it because that negative consequence was so hard for them that they will avoid it no matter what, because they don't even want a chance of getting in trouble. For those of you who have strong-willed children, you know that if there's even 1 out of 10 chance they could get away with it without getting a consequence, they're going to do it. So that's why 10 out of 10 times you need to be consistently giving a consequence. If you have strong-willed children, you know that they will always wait for that 1 out of 10 time that they could get away with it. So 9 times out of 10, they're going to continue to disobey. Children do what works for them, and we have to make it so that disobedience and misbehavior do not work for them. So the next thing for consequence is that this is an address to a couple of questions I had after the last video. It's important that we are brave and strong enough to allow our kids to feel the pain of consequences. And sometimes we're going to feel a little bit of that pain. People do not change their behavior until the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of change. As a parent, I completely understand that it's really hard to watch your children deal with the consequences of their own behavior, especially when they get to be older teens and the consequences of their behavior are bigger than just losing their iPad for a week. It's not getting to go to prom or not getting to go somewhere that's really special to them or something that you've been looking forward to as a parent, but they lost because of their actions. You as a parent have to allow them to suffer sometimes, because that's what parents do, is we suffer alongside them because we love them enough to know that this is going to make them grow. Your job is also, as a parent, to allow them to feel consequences that may actually be a consequence to you, because sometimes them losing their iPad means that you have to deal with them without screens, and they're going to be a little harder to deal with, and you have to deal with that. And it's hard when the punishment also feels like it's punishing you, but you are the parent and that's your job. So when we rescue our children from pain, even if it's pain that's caused by us or whatever, if we rescue our children from the pain of their own choices that they caused, we are not rescuing them from pain. We are rescuing them from wisdom. You do not want to rescue your children from the opportunity to learn wisdom. Now, one of my last ones is, I've got 2 more for consequences. Lectures are not consequences. So in our 4th one, when you give a choice or a consequence, this is important. Kids do not learn from lectures. Lectures are really great for after the consequence is over. But there has to be a tangible consequence. You may inadvertently give your kids a consequence of lecturing them for 5 minutes, but I did not say it's time to do your homework or you're going to get lectured for 10 minutes. It's time to do your homework or you lose your iPad, whatever your choice is. Because kids learn through behavior. They learn through uncomfortable pain. I'm sorry, that's true. So sometimes lectures work because your kid will feel bored by the lecture that you've given them. So you've inadvertently made the lecture work, but you didn't actually change anything in their heart. And then if you have a strong-willed kid, they're going to, I can sit through the lecture all day long and then just keep doing what I was doing. So that's not good either. Lectures also don't work. And sometimes when they do work, they work because your child is a super sensitive child and they're a very empathetic child and they feel so bad about disappointing you. And that is a really unhealthy dynamic to set up in children, because children should not have the burden of an adult's feelings on their shoulder. Children should learn because the consequences of their behavior are uncomfortable. But when you lecture a child by telling them that they made you so sad because of their behavior and that is their only consequence, that makes them feel responsible for people's feelings that are not their own. And that sets them up to have unhealthy boundaries when they get older. So your feelings and your moral lecture should never be the consequence when you're dealing with children. My last one is a direct conversation I had with somebody, especially in preschoolers. But it's really appropriate with teens too. When you're dealing with consequences, you need to be secure in your attachment. After my last video, a mother contacted me and told me that her daughter's timeout, in the middle of her timeout, she would cry and she would say, "Mommy, I love you. You don't love me anymore." And she would, the mother would stop and she would hug her daughter and say, "Of course I love you. Of course I love you. I'm just doing this to make you feel, just to learn," and all of this. And she would give her hugs and kisses and all that stuff in the middle of the timeout. And then she would put her back in timeout, and then she would come out of the timeout, and she's like, and then she would keep doing the behavior. Well, of course she did, because she didn't have a consequence. You interrupted her consequence. You took her consequence for her. You felt her pain instead of allowing her to feel that pain. And what I told her was, you need to be secure in your attachment. Children learn attachment to their parents in the first year of life. It is ingrained, it is unconscious. When teens and children get older, there are going to be moments where they think, "Oh, my mom doesn't love me anymore because she wouldn't let me do this thing that I wanted to do, even though I chose the bad consequence." All of you remember your teen years where you thought your parents didn't love you because they wouldn't let you do something. But you, as you got older and you matured, you realized that your parents did that because they did love you. Because unconsciously, attachment is formed in the first year of life. Your children are secure in their attachment. The only time that this is another conversation is when your children have dealt with any type of trauma in their life. Now, the traumas that I'm talking about, you can find if you do an ACE test, ACE, and those would help determine if you're dealing with children who have been in foster care or have reactive attachment. Those are going to be slightly different parenting techniques. But my husband has worked with these before, worked with children who have reactive attachment, and language of choice works because it's not domineering, it's not dictator, it's not authoritarian. It's actually really loving and takes and gives children power who have attachment issues. So it actually really works with kids who have attachment issues. But for those of you who are being, for a better word, manipulated by your children, who make you feel like, "Oh, well, she doesn't think I love her anymore," that's not how this works. Your kids are attached to you. They know that you love them. So be secure in that. And I just want to tell you guys, I'm thinking about all of you and I'm praying for you. And I really hope this helps somebody who's maybe stuck inside for the first time. I know that some of this is new and dealing with our kids. So I hope this helps. If you guys have any questions, please comment on the video. I'd love to talk about anything afterwards. And I hope this helps.